sustainability is difficult to define. It means so many things.
Right.
You just brought up what should be a simple conversation, and it opens up a can of massive worms. Meat, no meat, some meat, a kind of meat, local meat, expensive meat, chicken but no cows. Like, no idea, right? So what I tried to do is I tried to come up with a framework that says if you do these things, you are basically running a successful sustainability program. And these things is measure, reduce, and communicate. So you want to measure your internal emissions, your carbon emissions, and your business metrics. And I'll explain all these, but you want to measure internal emissions and business metrics. You want to reduce internal emissions and stakeholder emissions. And then you want to communicate on required reporting and voluntary marketing.
This episode is brought to you by Restaurant Systems Pro.
With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, Director of Sales at GreenPlaces and author of Attainable Sustainability, Building Your Corporate Climate Strategy, Adriel Lubarksy. Adriel, my man, are you feeling unstoppable today?
I've never felt better, Eric. What's up?
Dude,
What's going on?
Psyched to have you here. This is a hot topic right now. You know, it's something that's been on it's been bubbling and there's a storm brewing. There's a giant cumulus cloud growing.
A literal one in our sustainability case.
It hasn't quite become a cumulonimbus yet. I don't think hasn't reached peak potential, but
These
it's
are like
getting
deep weather references.
I used to be a commercial pilot.
I didn't know what I was getting myself into.
So, I'm psyched to have you here because this is a topic that I care a lot about. Our mission statement is to change the world through inspiring, empowering, and transforming the restaurant industry. And I think creating awareness about sustainability and doing good is good business, this mentality, this mantra that we can spread throughout the industry is part of I feel like my responsibility. So when you reached out to me and I saw that you were working with a restaurant group that I have a lot of admiration for, past guests on the show, Zingerman's Delicatessen, Ari Weinswag, awesome dude. I saw that you worked with Zingerman's Deli in the community of business. And I said, all right, I'm sold. Let's get this guy on the show. So with no further ado, let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
Mine's actually something a high school track coach would say, which is sprint the finish.
Sprint the finish.
Sprint the finish. It's just such an amazing way to think about everything you do. I'm not a very good runner. I never was, but I ran a lot and I like it. And I ran marathons and Ironmans and whatever. And just when you're the kind of person who sprints the finish, no matter how tired you are, how beaten down you are in a race, that just, I think, says something a lot about you. And that's what the coach always forced us to do, no matter how tired you were. If you're in last place or first place or have a huge lead or none at all, sprint the finish. And doing the same thing in work, doing the same thing in a relationship of no matter how beaten down you are, how close to the end of the day you are, just finishing as strong as you can. I just like the mantra, and I try to stick to it.
I think it's a good one. It's always in the last mile that we grow the most, too. So if you're gas and you got one more mile and I don't know if you're doing, I don't know. I'm not much of a runner, so I don't know.
a race. We call them races.
A long race, maybe a 10-mile race. The last mile is going to be the hardest mile. But when you push yourself at the end, that's where the growth comes, is leaving everything you have on the track.
It's what you remember.
Right.
I ran a Ironman, I think it was 70.2 or something like that. So it's 70 miles. So you do the swim, which is like a 1 point something miles. You do the bike ride, which is 56 miles. And then you do the run, 13.1 altogether. And I ran it in Santa Cruz. And my swim was sick. I was really proud of that. My bike ride was all right. It was fine. And my run was awful. Awful.
You finished, though. Did you sprint the last mile?
My wife's following me on the app. You can see how fast I was going. She's like, oh my God, he's starting off his miles. His runs at 8 minutes a mile. He's going so fast. And then all of a sudden in the middle, I'm at 11 minutes a mile. And then kind of late, I had a 13-minute mile.
That's my good mile.
It's going, it's going terribly, relatively. And then I got to the end and I demolished the last quarter mile. I sprinted it faster than I ever run. And I don't remember, none of the rest of it. You remember that last sprint. You remember how you feel. You're proud of yourself. Yeah. That's what people see. That's what they notice. That's what they talk about there. And, you could take it as a metaphor and apply wherever you want. But I like I like the idea of sprint the finish. It says a lot to me.
Great way to get this thing started. So before we dive into the bigger topic of sustainability and where the industry is today and where we're headed and what we can do in our business, my plan today is just to kind of share listeners who you are, tell your backstory. What has your evolution been as a professional? Then let's transition to the evolution of the industry at a whole, humanity's relationship with sustainability. How did we get to the worst part of where we were and how are we getting better, where are we today, and then what we can do in our own businesses today to be a part of the future. So take us to when you fell in love with this idea of sustainability.
Yeah, my entire career has been that of startups and sustainability. I fell into it not intentionally. I co-founded a business right out of college with someone much older and smarter and wiser than me that was in the environmental world. It was like Airbnb for the outdoors. So we work with a lot of environmental groups and landowners to get people outdoors so you can book their property, go camping,
cool.
fishing, hiking, whatever.
Did you do RVs? Because
I know you're in the market for an RV. We were mostly on the land side of things.
Got it.
But whatever. So I got into that world. I joined the board of a company or a nonprofit called GreenPlaces. I was GreenPlaces to Save at the time, and now it's GreenPlaces, and it was about like conservation and mitigation and things like that. Loved it. Moved on to a self-driving car company that we were using. It was an electric vehicle, so I learned a ton about that. And there I kind of saw my first moments of how companies care about sustainability. I remember this so well.
Can you timestamp this for us?
Yeah, the self-driving car company I joined in 2018.
Okay.
So it was January 2018. It was like self-driving car hype. The biggest company, Ford and General Motors and all of them were like, yeah, we're going to have self-driving cars by 2020. It was like, we're like,
well, the technology technically was there by 2020.
it was there by 2018. It just ended up, it wasn't good enough and it wasn't there at scale and whatever else. But like,
people are still the issue for the record, aren't they?
Almost always.
Yeah, like it's because of the people who don't want to adopt it.
Almost
that
always.
throw a wrench in the system.
But that's another podcast. But I believe in self-driving. We'll get there. But I remember this so well. We were selling self-driving cars to a lot of restaurants, actually, and a lot of grocery companies. And a lot of these massive businesses would say, I love this. This is awesome. I see the future. This would be a much easier buy if you had electric cars because this is part of our sustainability initiative.
Yeah.
And I just never heard that before. Like, I didn't know that massive companies like Walmart and H-E-B and Taco Bell, that they care about sustainability enough to spend money on it. That was my first introduction into it. And then about 2 years ago, I joined a company called GreenPlaces pretty early on. We were just getting started. And that idea was to bring an easy way to bring sustainability to every single business. So not focus on the Fortune 500 as much, who have 20 employees in a sustainability department, spend millions of dollars on consultants, whatever. But how do you bring this outside of the Fortune 500? How do you bring this to, small, medium, private equity sized businesses, small cap companies, all of whom need sustainability for a bunch of reasons we'll dive into, but they all need it. They all want it. They're all thinking about it. They're all trying to figure it out. But sustainability, I actually, one of my chapters in the book, I start off with the nerdiest possible sentence, but I say something like, sustainability is a lot like the Harry Potter Bogart.
I think I saw the first few words of that and I skipped over that paragraph.
You skipped to Harry Potter for the 18 billion Harry Potter fans out there. They're like, the Boggart, like it's this shape-shifting creature and no one knows exactly what it means. And that's what sustainability is like, what is sustainability? For a restaurant, is sustainability a restaurant that doesn't serve any meat? Or is it sustainability a restaurant that serves meat that's all locally grown? Is sustainability a carbon neutral restaurant? What if you're buying bad offsets? Is sustainability a restaurant that advocates for policy but doesn't donate to any nonprofit groups? Sustainability means you have only single-use forks that are compostable, no single-use forks, no forks at all. It's very difficult to identify.
Right.
And so that's what I've been doing for the last 2 years, and that's what part of this book and effort is.
And I hope we kind of end up there. I want to leave our listeners with like, here is what sustainability looks like and how you can get there and some examples of things you can start doing today to be more sustainable. I think no matter where you fall on that spectrum, as long as you're doing something and you're getting 1% better every day, you probably can't go all in if you're a small mom and pop and change everything all at once. But you can start making small changes, and you don't have to be perfect today, but you can start being like 1% better every day.
That's right.
So you mentioned like how, I think it was 2018, you didn't realize that these big corporations were starting to really invest in sustainability. Why was that? What was going on? Like, can we get into kind of like the evolution, the history of our awareness of sustainability, and when we kind of realized we had gone so far, and like what that evolution has looked like over the past like maybe 40 years?
Yeah, 40 is actually kind of the right number to think about. You might maybe extend it to 60. So
I think you reference like the 70s and 80s in the book, and like how things really started to catch foothold around that time.
Exactly. So in the 60s, books like Silent Spring came out, which was Rachel Carson's books about environmental damage that woke up the government. In 1970, I think the EPA was founded, and so the U.S. government started focusing a lot on it was the Environmental Protection Agency, started creating laws around this stuff. In the 70s, 80s, a few companies started coming out that started using sustainability as their core strategy. So I talk about Patagonia, I talk about Ben and Jerry's. These are companies that were like weirdo founders, a bunch of hippies who were like, what's a different way of doing business? And no one ever thought they'd be successful. Everyone thought it was a weird niche thing. But they said, hey, if I'm Patagonia, or, for the food folks out there, I'm Ben and Jerry's. What if Planet was part of my three-legged strategy? For Ben and Jerry's, they have a famous three-legged stool strategy: people, planet, and profit.
In that order.
In that order. And Planet is a really important thing that they do.
Yep.
Those are a bunch of weirdo companies. But that was the start of a trend.
Ironically, I was listening to, I don't know if you heard of Simon Sinek's
Does it start with why?
No, his more recent book that came out is The Infinity Game, and he profiles Patagonia in that book about like what is an infinity game. It's a game where there is no winner, there is no end. It's a game that it's a bigger purpose.
There's circularity in it, right? Patagonia's whole thing is I'll sell you a shirt. If there's ever anything wrong with it, give me the shirt back. I'll fix it. I'll give you and we'll just cycle this shirt back and forth for 100 years until
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think what they do is they buy back, or you can like send your used stuff to them so they can recycle it or upcycle it. They also, what was the other thing that they did? Like they had an ad where it was like, this is what it costs. This is the pollution. This is the cost that this jacket. Like this is like the 90s or something like that, or maybe the early 2000s. And they basically just like listed all these facts about the damage it does to produce that one jacket.
That's what it means when something's produced in Vietnam with slave labor, child labor, low paid labor, or a factory that's not clean or polluting the water.
Something like 24 pounds of carbon waste was made in the production of one shirt, and the shirt doesn't even or the jacket doesn't even weigh a pound.
And that number, by the way, that 24 pounds of carbon waste, that's something we're going to talk about a lot, I think, in this conversation. There's basically, and I'll talk more about the evolution of this journey of market sustainability, but that's called carbon accounting. So carbon accounting is measuring your carbon footprint. It's measuring the impact that your business broadly, or a single product, in this case a shirt, has on the planet. And you take everything into account. So for a restaurant, when you talk about carbon accounting, you talk about energy use, you talk about all the stuff that you buy, like all the food and silverware, you talk about your employees commuting to work, you talk about the swag you sell because everyone wants a t-shirt with your brand on it, you talk about flying to a conference. You count up all those things because all of them obviously have some sort of impact on the planet. It's not to reprimand you. It's not to say you're bad for doing this or you're good. It's just to say let's acknowledge it and let's price it in. Let's think about the planetary side of it. So you talking about 24 kilograms of a shirt, that was a crazy thing to do in 1990, whatever. Like nobody did that, but they were the first step. Later on, maybe in the early 2000s, some companies started seeing sustainability as a market advantage. So they just said, I think our customers might care about this. I think this would be cool if we had some sustainability marketing, if we had Leonardo DiCaprio as a sponsor. Like, our young people would like that. That'd be a cool thing. Let's get rid of some grocery bags. That became a popular thing. Let's talk about the environment.
It's funny you mention that because, like, I often stay in Jersey City when I come to New York because it's right over the bridge. The hotel rates are like less, like half, like
90% of the cost and 80% of the fun.
And the first time I stayed there, I was thinking to myself, this is gonna be like sorry if anybody's listening to this that lives in Jersey City or Hoboken. I was like, this place is probably gonna be a pit. It's gonna be filthy. I got there and like I was like, wow, it's a lot cleaner than
even people who live in Hoboken are surprised.
Yeah, and then I went to a I think like a gas station for like, I don't know, like a snack, water or something like that. And I was like, can I get a bag? Because they're like, no. It was like, we don't, it's illegal to have bags. And I was like, that is such an obvious solution.
Yeah.
Just make it illegal.
Yeah.
Like, and people will, like, what is like the benefit? We're just trying to offer convenience to the consumers, really what it comes down to. Anyway, I don't want to get too far ahead, but
that's like
too much on a rabbit
hole. I'll get there, but that's sort of the last stage of sustainability. So we went into like sustainability is a market advantage. Let's talk about it. Let's be cool. Let's be one of those hip companies. Let's have some vegan stuff, whatever. Then it started becoming, that was in the CMO's department. It was the chief marketing officer who was coming up with these ideas. Then in like the mid 2010s, it sort of became the CFO and the chief legal officer's job. These are businesses who were like, hey, like, I'm backed by a private equity company that has LPs in Europe. And in Europe, every bank says that every dollar it invests has to know the carbon footprint. So let me start to measure it just in case it's important. Well, the chief legal officer started realizing that companies, again, mostly in Europe, it'll start to happen in the US, are starting to get sued when they make unfounded sustainability claims. It's called greenwashing.
Yeah.
So if this happened to Keurig in Canada. They got sued millions of dollars because they talk about the recyclability of their products when they actually weren't recyclable. And they just made claims that they couldn't stand by, and they got sued. This was starting to happen. It was the chief legal officer and CFO. So it was becoming like climate as risk mitigation.
What also goes to show the power of people wanting to do good, and doing good is good business, but you can't say that you're doing good and then just use that leverage to sell more.
You got to we'll talk about it. I always talk about action and transparency.
Yeah.
You got to act before you talk about what you're doing,
Yeah.
and you got to be very transparent about what you're doing, the risks of that as well.
Well, I picked up one of the and this was like early in the introduction. I will say that as we're recording this, your book is not published yet.
Coming out in October.
I got a
It'll be
digital
here soon.
version of your book. I think I had like 5 days to read it. I went through and I kind of skimmed as much of it as I could. So my details aren't perfect, but I do have a big picture of what we're here to talk about and the arguments you made in the book. I can't wait to slow down and really get intimate with it though. But you were talking about early in the book, you're talking about this kind of evolution where it was the idea of sustainability was kind of on the shoulders of the consumer. And these big corporations, these organizations were saying, well, the consumer wants these things. They want convenience. They want
to travel
value.
everywhere. They want more clothes every
Right.
season.
It's our job to give the consumer what they want. And then there was a shift where it went off the shoulders of the consumer and started being on the shoulders of these corporations.
Yeah.
What happened there where there was a transition where this corporate responsibility started to kick in?
So a little bit of history, just because this is nuts. Yeah. The idea of a carbon footprint, what I just introduced, a lot of that early research and even the marketing campaign for it was actually started and supported by two of the biggest polluters in American business, or any business. It was British Petroleum and General Motors. Okay. These two companies, oil and cars, were like, oh no, we're being like everyone's all up in a tizzy about environmental stuff. Al Gore's documentary just came out. Michael Moore's on a rampage. Leonardo DiCaprio's talking about this stuff in his Oscar speeches. Like, oh no, woe is me. Let's invent the carbon footprint and tell individuals, hey, you should keep your carbon footprint low. Right, Eric, like you care about sustainability? No problem. Here's a calculator. British Petroleum actually put out a calculator online. I think it was at the website was bp.com/footprint. You can probably Google this and find an old version, and you can calculate your own carbon footprint. And the optimist in that is like, oh, good for BP. They're starting to talk about this. This is great. But if you really think about it, they're like, oh, how can we like wave our hands around a bunch and get everyone off of our backs about this whole climate thing and make it your problem? Oh, like, Eric, you care about the environment? Well, go ahead. Here's your calculator. You should care about it. What changed over time is that regulation came in, and this is kind of the fourth phase, and the phase we're in now is climate as compliance.
When did this come in? Can you timestamp it? Just give that
in
myself
Europe.
And the listeners an
In
idea.
Europe, like true regulation started coming in like the late 2000s and early 2010s, where companies over a certain amount of revenue had to report on their emissions. The cap and trade program, which came in 2006, which basically said European companies that have more than X amount of emissions need to buy credits from companies that have fewer emissions than that, so we can have a net amount of emissions. And that was really successful and drove down the emissions of Europe quite a bit over time. In the United States, a lot of that was affected by European investors. So it always comes back to money. And most of the arguments I make in my book are not about, hey, you should be a sustainable business because the young kids will like it and you'll feel good about it. And like, wouldn't that be nice? I hope you feel that way, but I don't really care. A lot of my argument comes down to dollars and cents and profitability and finance. European dollars would not come into the United States into investments unless these were into more sustainable investments. And so American private equity companies said, hey, I want to buy more restaurants or I want to invest in equipment or whatever. I cannot get a loan or I cannot get investment unless I know my sustainability information. And so that was kind of a soft external regulation. But right now, as we speak, it's September 2023. It is expected that in October 2023, the SEC in the United States actually comes out with regulation requiring publicly traded companies to report on their carbon emissions and to build plans to reduce it. About a year ago, the federal government said that any contractor to the federal government that does more than $7 million in business with the federal government, which is who knows how many tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of businesses, have to report to what's called the Carbon Disclosure Project. So these things start coming from everywhere where European money and American government and American investors and BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, has been talking about the importance of ESG and came up with a fund solely dedicated to investing in ESG. That has been the landscape of the last 10 years where bits and pieces and pushes and individual companies like Microsoft and Google started doing a lot around this stuff. But where we're at today and where we're going to be for the next 10 years is climate as compliance. If you want to be a publicly traded company already in Europe and very soon in the United States, you're going to have to know your carbon emissions and you're going to have a sustainability strategy.
Why is it? Is it just so the level of transparency so you as a consumer can choose to give the money to the people who you want?
It's coming at it less from a consumer perspective. The regulatory side of it is much less about consumer choice than it is about financial transparency. That's why it's happening under the SEC.
Can you say that one more time?
So it's less about like you as a consumer should be able to choose a more sustainable business over less sustainable business to give your money to, and more about finance.
Got it.
So that's why this regulation is coming from the SEC.
So it's more about finance because these companies want to invest in brands that are doing good.
Basically, if I'm an investor and I got $1 billion to throw around here and there, my thesis is that unless you are a sustainable company, you will make less money, you'll have less opportunities, customers will want you less, and I as an investor should have transparency into that metric so I can make my decision.
Yeah,
so that's where this is coming from. So that's why the SEC is doing this and not the Consumer Protection Agency. It's like businesses need this, and so it is good for business if we have this, and it'll make
it's a better investment for us because there's longevity.
That's right.
Like it's a good investment because this organization isn't going to go anywhere because they're not going to do anything that will put them under because they made it bad.
That's right. And that seems super distant for so many restaurant owners. So I just want to bring it back. Like, let's say you are a publicly traded company, then this is obvious. You have to do this. Probably your investor relations team. But is it distant
though when you think about restaurant industry being the second largest industry, second to healthcare, then it's probably the closest to, I don't know, like the food production is responsible for how much waste?
Oh, I talk about the 4 C's of climate change all the time. Yeah. The 4 things we really need to work on as a society are coal, cars, cement, and cows.
Yeah.
If we can fix those 4 things, coal, how we get energy, cars, how we get around, cement, how our built environment, and cows, basically the food system, that's 95% of climate change. Yeah. Like nothing else matters. Right. And restaurants are like one of the biggest energy users. Obviously, the food is related. Right. They're in the built environment. Like that's a massive.
But you're looking at cow, right, or food generally. It piggybacks on like almost all those other, like especially transportation, because you can't produce food without getting it to the people.
Restaurants are at the crux, and food generally is at the crux of so much sustainability. And on the other side too, if we don't figure this out,
also packaging. Sorry,
packaging. If we don't figure this out, then you have food shortages, and your food costs go up. And if you have we have this huge problem where all of a sudden 99% of bananas all come from Angola, and it's literally one species of banana because whatever. I'm not going to explain banana history, but that's what happened. If there's one plague or one pest that wipes out bananas, you can't serve your banana smoothie anymore, and you're going to lose $20,000 of revenue, and that hurts your business. So, like, sustainability matters from all ends. If you want private equity money, if you want more customers to come to you, which we can talk more about, like the marketing, consumer choice. Right. If you want to save money on stuff, if you want to grow, my favorite example, I'll tell this one really quickly, of how much this affects a non-publicly traded company restaurant. Is I won't name them, but there's a very big business that runs restaurants in airports and train stations. That's their thing. They're in these transportation hubs. They have a couple thousand restaurants. They started losing bids in new airports because they didn't have a sustainability strategy. All these new airports said, "Hey, we are only giving bids to businesses who have sustainability strategies. Like, we're an airport, we're super pollutant, we're trying to think about it. You need to have this." This massive company started losing bids. They started building a sustainability strategy. They're one of my clients, so I've been working with them a lot. Started building this stuff out and started winning bids because they're a good business. They're a good operator. They make good food. They have all this stuff. But you need to serve your customers, which is the individuals who buy your food, but it's also your landlord and your investors and everyone else. You got to serve them what they want, and they want and require a sustainability plan.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I kind of want to talk. I definitely want to make sure we get into the benefits of why you should consider being more sustainable. Why, what's in it for you as a restaurant owner, and how you can go about doing that. And we'll get into the measure, reduce, and communicate the kind of the pillars that you've identified as where to start and what this rolling this out looks like. But we have almost 2 more hours to go. I mean, we got an hour and a half right now, and 25 minutes.
Let's chit chat.
And I'm just kind of, I think this is just kind of a fun topic, right? So I kind of started by asking you, it went from the corporation saying this is a consumer issue. We are just here to give the consumer what the consumer wants. And then that shifted to being a corporate responsibility. And you said that's really because that's where these investors, I think you had a quote in the book from Blackstone, the CEO of Blackstone.
BlackRock.
Thank you. Yeah. Stone Rock.
Honestly, what's the difference? they couldn't think of better names for themselves.
Right.
That's crazy.
Thank you for the correction. I had it written down. I'm scrolling. I need like a big. I wish I could travel with a giant monitor.
We need a big TV screen. If you want to control
Here
F,
it is.
Larry Fink, it was probably
Larry Fink. Yeah. I mean, do you know the quote?
I
Probably
had a
not
couple in
verbatim.
there. I don't
I have it
remember.
written down here if you want me to read it.
Yeah, hit him.
So again, Larry Fink, BlackRock CEO, I believe that we are on the edge of a fundamental reshaping of finance. In the near future, and sooner than most anticipate, there will be a significant reallocation of capital, which is kind of what you were alluding to. We believe that the sustainability should be our new standard of investing. So that's kind of, when did this quote come? Do you know when this was?
I think that one was from Larry Fink's 2021 or 2022 annual letter to shareholders. Let me set some
So
context.
that's recent.
In case you don't know, BlackRock, they're the largest
Trillions.
asset manager in the world. I think $8 trillion under management. I
They're
put this quote. I
influencers,
basically I said the context in the book, and I'm basically like, when Larry Fink speaks, every business in the world listens, because if you want loans, investments, customers, what they say matters. So that's setting the stage, and there's been a lot of recent back and forth about ESG, call it what you want, whatever. But that quote that you just read, which is a great pull quote, is if that's not the clearest business argument for thinking about sustainability ever, then I don't know what is. The largest investor on earth, and I say this also, I think immediately after that quote, I think I say something like, so what happened? Did Larry Fink become a hippie? Did Larry Fink, did his kids pester him to care about the planet? Did he, go to his private island and realize there's fewer turtles than there were last year?
Yeah.
No way. No, none of that happened. None of that happened. What happened is that he realized he could make a whole lot more money
Following consumer trends.
following consumer trends.
Yeah.
And the current consumer trend and the current everything and regulatory trend and whatever is figuring out sustainability.
Yeah.
I almost called the book Good Business, because
Doing
that's what
good
I was
is
trying
good
to
business.
say.
And I
It's
say
good,
that all the time. Doing
on
good is
either
good
end.
business.
It's on either end.
And I think that this is kind of when I say Restaurant Unstoppable's mission statement is to transform the world through inspiring and empowering the restaurant industry. I believe that and what you're seeing here, it's happening is that. I think if you open a business, if you start a business, it's your responsibility. I think doing good is good business, but it's your responsibility. We talk about this in Matt Pepsel's book, or he talked about this in his book. We discussed it on the podcast. What's the name of the book? I always forget. Expand the Circle. And it's this idea of enlightened leadership, where leadership starts with you, right? When you lift yourself up, you lift up the people who are, closest to you, family, friends, to the people that you work with, to the organization you work for. I think this is kind of what's happening right now, is this idea of these investors, and it's all stemmed from the consumer, what the consumer wants. And it's kind of this back and forth, but I kind of make the argument that it is, to your point, how we or to these CEOs points 30 years ago, 40 years ago, that the consumer really at the end of the day, and consumer is a capitalistic consumer market, consumerism, or what's the word I'm looking for?
Capitalism?
Not capitalism, but I think consumerism. It's not.
Yeah.
Why am I struggling right now?
Could be. I'll give you consumerism.
But it's capitalism. But what's the word? Is it consumerism?
Yeah, when people you're led by what people buy and what people want.
I don't know why I'm at a loss for words. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we're giving you consumerism.
At the end of the day, really, we are just trying to give the consumer what they want. I think we're reacting to the consumer and giving the consumer what they want isn't necessarily the best thing for everybody.
And it's a difficult thing too,
Right.
right? Take sustainability, right? Let's bring it into a restaurant context, into what you'd actually do. What is it that customers want? They don't necessarily want, as every restaurant owner knows, even those who care a lot about sustainability, don't want vegan, plastic-free everything, super expensive, because those all produced in the backyard products. That's not what they want. Consumers never going to buy that.
Yeah.
A great example is Ben and Jerry's head of sustainability was interviewed, and someone was asking her about like, oh, so what are you guys doing like about sustainability? Dairy is obviously a huge issue for an ice cream company like Ben and Jerry's. It's like, yeah, we started this line of vegan ice creams, but honestly, consumers don't want them.
Yeah.
Like when they buy ice cream, they want delicious, fatty
they want
dairy.
to make a bad decision.
Yeah.
It's all about making bad decisions.
So you got to give consumers what they want, and
Right.
for Ben and Jerry's, they should have the vegan line. There's a group of people who want that and who choose that, but that's not what consumers want. So you as a restaurant owner need to think really hard about what it is that your customer wants and begin to make changes where you can.
Well, I guess the point that I was trying to make is that I think we have to come to this point where it's not about, and I think this manifests in the world of hospitality and restaurants by just offering value. And the way that we make money by offering value is by giving a lot of stuff at really low quality, we'll say, like trying to give the most perceived value,
The McDonald's
and do it as
business.
cheap as possible.
Yeah.
Right. And that's just not good for everybody. I just feel like there's this point where I think that businesses have to kind of take a foothold and say, listen, consumer, cut the shit, like we can't give you what you want because what you want isn't good for all of us. Like there has to be like a shift in tide.
And it's because businesses can be smarter than consumers.
Right.
A business can hire somebody to educate them about what's good and what's bad and how to do something better. Consumers just like, I've only ever eaten this, so I'm going to keep eating this because it's delicious. But a business can be like, all right, a great example is Just Salad, which is a big New York City chain here, which I had for lunch and I love. They do such a good job. So Just Salad is a B Corp, a benefit corporation. They have, I think, 60 or so locations, mostly around New York. They might have expanded a little bit. And they're fantastic. And one of the things that they did that was nuts is every fast casual restaurant ever said the most obvious thing, which is the only way to serve our customers is in a plastic bowl that they'll take out and throw away, or disposable bowl. Initially it was plastic. Then Chipotle came around. It was kind of compostable. Just Salad said, that's insane. That's not the only way to do this. This is what consumer wanted because all consumers knew was a compostable bowl.
Because we created that consumer habit. We created that habit because we gave them what they want, convenience.
Yeah, they want a convenience. They want to throw it out.
God forbid you travel with your own bag in like bowl. Oh my God,
insane. Except there's a huge swath of consumers who all of a sudden wanted it, and Just Salad worked really hard to create a reusable bowl program where you pay $1 to get the bowl, and then you get $1 off all your meals, and you bring it back and you wash, and they wash it.
Yeah, and I'm sure that bowl hangs on the outside of their bag because they want the entire world to know how thoughtful and considerate they are about the environment.
And it is crushing.
Yeah,
like that bowl program is crushing, and it's amazing, and it's doing so well. And the idea of a reusable bowl was just so insane for a business of.
So I'm assuming you're
size.
you're probably profiting on the bowl, right?
They make and yeah, that aside, the business makes money left and right.
Yeah.
Like more people will go to Just Salad because what do I want to choose? Just Salad that I have the bowl for, or their competitor that are like, I don't know, I don't have the bowl, or I'll choose Just Salad even if I don't have the bowl because I like that they're the kind of business that gives me the bowl, or they can charge $1 extra for all their salads, bowl aside, just because they're the type of business that does this and sustainability matters, and we're a B Corp, and let's charge $1 extra because you're working with a higher end clientele who cares about whatever. Like they're saving money on all the plastic bowls that they would be buying, or compostable bowls that they'd be buying otherwise. On every stream, if you do this stuff well, sustainability is about waste reduction, and waste reduction just means saving money.
Right. Right. I think there's another. So to wrap up this thought, I guess, and this, I'm not the expert. I'm not trying to be here telling you, the listener, what to do. I'm here to learn. But where I fall personally is I think I'm pro-capitalism. I think I'm anti-consumerism though. And I think consumerism is all about literally consuming and making sure that we have the nucleus family, like where every marriage has a house and every house has a lawnmower, and it's all about
a turkey in every oven and a car in every garage.
Exactly, right? And that's unsustainable, right? That's about just trying to make things for the sake of commerce and business and economy, production, right?
And that was what the 80s and 90s was. Globalization. Right. It was mass manufacturing. It was how many cheap dollar toys can we get from China? I think it's a version of capitalism.
But I mean,
capitalism is just. I think capitalism is really just like immense choice.
You mentioned conscious capitalism.
Yeah.
Right. So sorry, I cut you short. Immense choice.
Capitalism is just choice, right? All capitalism is a consumer can get whatever they want.
Right.
And if what they want is super cheap toys from China, they can get super cheap toys from China. at
But
the
that's
moment,
freedom, technically, right?
That's freedom.
The freedom of choice.
for sure. And that capitalism is like, let's create the economic system in which businesses can produce that, and we won't regulate them so they can't, whatever. But capitalism also means let's evolve. Let's build really successful long-term companies. Let's make sure we're not sued by the government for polluting a river.
Yeah.
Let's make sure that young customers who care more about the planet or care more about whatever young customers care about choose my business over anyone else. And customer capitalism today is a world away from capitalism in the 90s. They're just two different things.
I think a lot of people would argue that capitalism is about getting returns for the stakeholders, and that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
But was that the intention of capitalism, or was that one person's perception of what capitalism should be that was popularized a long time ago?
Man, we are getting deep. I like this. I
You know
like this
what
a
I'm saying?
lot. Yeah, I don't know if any of your listeners are going to like this, but I like this
I think
a
it's
lot.
really like, but like I'm having fun. So like, I mean, I think it's important to talk about this stuff because really about when it comes down to sustainability, it's about choice. It's about enlightenment. It's about sharing information, empowering people with knowledge. And that's what we're here to do. And I think it's where I'm going with this kind of come full circle. I think it's our responsibility as restaurant owners to educate the consumer and say, hey, yeah, this burger might be $10, but it was grown 10 miles away and raised holistically, sustainably. And I don't think that beef or cows are evil, but I think that the system that it exists in, a centralized food system where we're, shipping food all over the country from one spot, that is unsustainable, but cows could also be the answer if you're talking about regenerative farming, right? So it's not like you said, and that kind of leads us to the next thing, like what is sustainability? Like, how do you define it? Does that mean beyond burgers? I don't necessarily think that's the answer because that's almost just as bad as cows when you're mono farming. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's not that clear.
It's not clear. It's a very difficult thing, to, just like you and I struggle to define capitalism, consumerism. Like,
and I'm not an economist. I'm a dummy from East Bumfuck, New Hampshire. So like, I'm doing my best here.
Sustainability is very difficult to define.
Right.
And so I try to come up.
Am I allowed to curse in a WeWork? I'm kind of being.
I think only in a WeWork. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it soundproof?
WeWork is a safe space. Yeah. You should see the salespeople out there.
I don't want to get you in
hall.
trouble.
No, it's encouraged. We'd be kicked out if we didn't curse.
Sorry.
Sustainability is difficult to define. It means so many things.
Right.
You just brought up what should be a simple conversation, and it opens up a can of massive worms. Meat, no meat, some meat, a kind of meat, local meat, expensive meat, chicken but no cows. Like, no idea, right? So what I tried to do is I tried to come up with a framework that says if you do these things, you are basically running a successful sustainability program. And these things is measure, reduce, and communicate.
Yeah.
So you want to measure your internal emissions, your carbon emissions, and your business metrics. And I'll explain all these, but you want to measure internal emissions and business metrics. You want to reduce internal emissions and stakeholder emissions. And then you want to communicate on required reporting and voluntary marketing. So let me explain all those quickly, and then we can dive into whatever seems most interesting.
Yeah, we should probably take a break to thank our sponsors, and we'll be right back. This is a good spot.
We have to interrupt today's video to let you know that right now, Restaurant Systems Pro is offering a no strings attached 60-day trial that will help you improve your systems, increase your profit, and find better work-life balance. All you have to do is click the link below.
We're back. So you were just getting into the kind of the pillars that we're going to be talking about. Do you want to list those one more time quickly?
Yeah. So I try to create a framework that's going to be really easy for people to understand if they're doing the sustainability thing or not. So it's called measure, reduce, communicate. And you want to be measuring you want to be measuring sustainability metrics and business metrics. You want to be reducing internal emissions and stakeholder emissions. And you want to be communicating on required reporting and voluntary marketing. So I'll touch upon those 6 things really, really quickly, and then we can dive into whatever. But with measurement, you want to measure your sustainability metrics and your business metrics. Sustainability metrics really mostly means your carbon emissions. So you want to do what's called carbon accounting, which we can dive into, and that's the work I mostly do. But you want to measure the impact your business has on the planet, and you want to measure business metrics associated with that. Because a good sustainability program is not one that just reduces emissions to zero in a vacuum. It's one that helps the business be more successful. So tied to anything you do around sustainability, you want to make sure it's increasing profitability, increasing revenue, decreasing costs, increasing customer engagement, increasing employee retention, whatever the business metrics are that matters. On the reduce, you want to reduce internal emissions and stakeholder emissions. So you want to make your carbon footprint go down, and you want to help all your stakeholders, maybe customers, maybe investors, maybe your realtors, maybe other people in your market, bring their emissions down. Happy to give examples of that. And on communicate, you want to do required reporting and voluntary marketing. So required reporting is like if you want to comply with the SEC, or if one of your largest customers ask you to apply to the CDP framework, or if your investors are asking you for data around your carbon emissions. That's all required. And then voluntary marketing is how do you build a brand around sustainability? How do you tell your customers what you're doing and not get accused of greenwashing? How do you get your employees excited and use this as a recruitment strategy? So if you're doing those three things, measure, reduce, communicate, and focusing on the two pillars between each one of those, you'll basically have the crux of a sustainability program. You want to customize things based on your business and your size and your values and what you care about and what's possible and what's cheap or affordable or you can do or whatever. But that's kind of the crux of what you should be doing to have a sustainability program.
Okay, so we're going to unpackage these three pillars. I don't, what the choice description you like to call these things?
It's a framework.
It's a framework. I'll call it framework going forward.
It seems official. I feel like my
Yeah.
business professor would be proud of me.
I am kind of curious, and I'm just curious. Where do you fall as somebody who spends their time studying sustainability, like in terms of like what you consider to be sustainable? Do you think cows are bad? Do you think that we should stop eating meat? I'm just curious. What is your perspective on this? Teach me something.
Are cows bad? So I would say,
just not necessarily to that specific
no.
question,
I think that's actually it's a good framework because you can see I'm struggling with are cows bad.
Right.
I would say no. Cows are not bad. We've been farming for 10,000 years and we built this amazing culture and I'm Jewish and I'm cooking a brisket for Rosh Hashanah in 3 days. No, I don't think cows are bad. I do think the system in which cows are currently raised is a huge problem. And so the way I buy meat is I buy meat from actually the oldest butcher in New York, happens to be down the street from me. I buy my meat from Staubett's Market, most of which is local meat, most of which I pay a lot more money for than I would anywhere else. And I try to make it grass-fed and organic when I can. I try not to make it every meal. Are cows bad? I don't think so. Are cows going away? Absolutely not. Right. Is McDonald's ever going to stop selling real burgers? No freaking way. But the system is complicated. Is bad. It's wrong. It's something we need to get out of.
But I think the one thing that we pointed out is that it's at the end of the day, most of these organizations, what drives this is the consumer, right? So I don't know. I think it's just a matter of educating people. And I think that's the reason why I'm bringing this back to the surface after we took a break and got away from it is because I think it's really important that if I live out my mission to transform the world through inspiring and empowering the restaurant industry, I have to encourage restaurateurs to educate the consumer and say, hey, create a business that has an affinity game, that has an overarching purpose or mission, and educate people. And when you do that, you attract onto yourself the future, right? The people who want to identify with your values. And, I think this is conscious capitalism, right? Yeah. But it's hard. Like you see people coming out, and I've had people on the show who specialize in vegan, right? Or only do Beyond Burgers or, whatever that might be.
Cool. They got a specific type of consumer.
Like whatever, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, I think it's also important is something that's less or not as sustainable or maybe slightly more sustainable than something else necessarily a sustainable thing? Like is the Beyond Burger or the Impossible Burger truly a sustainable
I like
thing?
to say that while sustainability is super clear, there's no such thing as actually sustainable.
Right.
And the difference there is sustainability is about progress. It's about a journey. It's about, you said earlier, getting 1% better every day. It's about improving things. Sustainable is there's no end in sight. It's not like, oh yeah, if you reach this thing, if you become carbon neutral, if you are vegan, if you never drive or fly a day in your life, you are sustainable. You might be living sustainably. You might be further down the road of sustainability. The original cover design that I had for this book was a ladder, a green ladder that went all the way up, basically saying like it goes all the way, like you'll never see the finish to it. It's just about progress. So
right.
When you're thinking as a business owner, as a restaurant, and let's say you're a burger shop, and you're like, I can't do I sell cheeseburgers. Like literally, what can I possibly be doing? I'm not going to stop selling cheese. I'm Zingerman's Deli. You
Right.
talk about Zingerman's Deli has the best sandwiches in the world.
So good.
So
if
good.
you're ever in Ann Arbor or within an hour of Ann Arbor, if you're on Route 90
If
going
you are
west,
if you are in the Midwest,
go 3 hours out of your way. Like, make it happen.
Zingerman's is insane, and their pastrami Reuben, like just the whole thing is wild. It's not about, and I told them this before we ever worked together. I said, I'm not telling you should stop selling meat. That's insane. It's not with your
It's
culture.
also ludicrous.
It's not what your customers want. It's not good for your business. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
It's about improving things a little bit over time. It's if you sell meat, get rid of the plastic packaging.
Right.
Start there. Don't change the food at all. Your food is what you spent 60 years building. If you are sell meat, can you get a little bit more of it locally? If you sell meat, can you charge an extra $1 or $2 for this sandwich and move $1 out of every sandwich into some sort of like carbon removal project or an environmental nonprofit or whatever? Like, how can you continue to make progress?
I think part of the issue is anybody who's alive right now, like, we live in a world that's unrecognizable if you go back 70, 80 years ago. Our, like, grandparents, great-grandparents, if they were to, like, travel into the future and see how good we have it and how convenient our world is and how good we've gotten at mass production and industrialization, all we know is what we know, and what we know, ironically, is unprecedented relative to not that long ago. And I think it's a matter of just taking your perspective and go, oh my God, like, never before have we been so good at producing cows.
Never before could you have meat 3 times a day.
Right.
That's an insane idea.
Exactly. And I think that it's all about perspective, because what we know, if you were born in America and you grew up in this country, all you know is abundance, you know? And I think that it's really just important to say, listen, is meat evil? No. Is our relationship with meat fucking bonkers? Absolutely. Because we just have so much abundance. We have so much wealth, and never before has, maybe with the argument of like the Inuit who like only ate like buffalo and woolly mammoth and they survived off that. Like, but normally it's not like there's more of a carnivore diet that's balanced.
Look, I think the people who work in the sustainability movement and work on that effort on a broad spectrum, and there's certainly a group of like environmental, I don't know, hard-nosers sound negative, but whatever. People who are really strict on it, the ones who are like throwing cans of soup at the Mona Lisa to like fight against fossil fuels, who are like, we got to stop now. Like, we all got to be, like, we've gone too far. We all got to be vegan. We all can't travel anymore. We all need this stuff. And I think it's really important to have them push the conversation and have them do all that. I said a little further down the spectrum, which is perhaps whatever it is, but like, I think that we are not moving away very far, very fast from what we have now. Which is not happening. I like to travel. I go on planes. Yeah. I eat meat.
I confess that I want to buy an RV.
Yeah.
9 miles to the gallon.
It's those are the things that they are. But we need to continue to improve. My aunt, to the story in the book, but my aunt Luba, my family's all immigrants from the former Soviet Union. They are amazed every day to this point, in a way only an immigrant could be, by how much America has to offer, and it is all a miracle, as it genuinely, truly is. And I posted on LinkedIn something about sustainability, and we all got to make progress, and we all got to live in a better world. And she commented on there, and I posted this picture in the book. She commented on there and says, I'm all for a better planet, but are you ready to live without a refrigerator? Because I am not. And like, no.
Think about how much more fresh food would be if you had to like eat it immediately and like it was more local.
No, I mean, I'm not ready to live. No, I'm definitely not, Aunt Luba, living without my refrigerator. Like, neither are you. I know it uses energy.
I do like my frozen smoothies.
I know refrigerators are bad for the planet, but like, no, it's not about getting rid of your refrigerator. It's just about making progress and improving. And can we use less harmful refrigerants?
Right.
Can we buy high quality carbon offsets for the energy and the refrigerant gases that are emitted? Can we try to buy fresh and also think about the transportation? Like, you need to think about these things. It's not about deleting it. That's never going to happen. There should be vegan restaurants. Like, we work with Slutty Vegan. They're a great restaurant brand.
Past guests on the show.
That's awesome. Things like that. Right behind us actually is Beatnik, a New York City place, which is all vegan. That's great.
I don't have the answers. I just like to poke the beast, man. I just like to poke the beast and say, is this really better? Or like, and like who, I mean, the only way you know or you learn is by just discussing it and you know, throwing rocks at a. And
that's why measurement is, measurement is the first part of this framework. Because if you say, all right, great, I'm a business owner, what do I do?
Right. Great segue.
What do I do? Thank you.
Thanks for pulling me off my, I just like talking about this stuff, dude. I secretly just love talking about
It's cool.
this
Like
stuff.
it's all
fun.
sustainability is such a good vibe.
Yeah.
Everyone cares about it. It's not like you have the doomsday end of the world group. Like it's also super fun to be better, greener.
I have a
happier.
2-hour-long podcast so I can have my fun. I want to be able to selfishly talk about things that I think are interesting. But we still have an hour before we have to wrap things up. So there's plenty of time to unpackage these pillars. But you're right. What gets measured gets minded is one of the things that we like to say here. Is that you have to measure it in order to track your progress.
You got to know where you're at. So if you say, look, this happens all the time. A restaurant goes, all right, I care about this. Who knows the reason? Maybe my customers care about it. Maybe my private equity firm is making me do this. Maybe I'm on a college campus and I think the kids will like it. Maybe my employees really keep badgering me. Whatever. I care about it. What do I do? First thing you should do is measure your carbon emissions. Do what's called carbon accounting. And you take a look at, there's 3 scopes of emissions. Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3. And Scope 3 has 15 categories. These aren't made up by me. This is by what's called the GHG protocol, which is an international body. So companies as big as Google and as small as Just Salad all measure emissions according to the same rules. Scope 1 emissions for a restaurant is going to be what's called fugitive emissions.
You said fugitive?
Fugitive.
Okay.
So that's going to be things like cars that you might own. Things like your refrigerators are going to fall under there. Maybe your propane, fugitive emissions. Scope 2 emissions are going to be purchased electricity. So that's going to be the electric bill you get predominantly, and based on where you are in the country, whether it's generated by coal or by renewables or by hydro or whatever. And Scope 3 is everything else in your business. The 15 categories cover everything from what's called purchased goods and services, so all the meat and the forks and the paper napkins and whatever, to your employee commute, to the flying to a marketing conference to learn more, whatever. So you want to measure your carbon footprint, because once you get that broad number back, and it usually ends up being something like 1,000 metric tons of emissions per restaurant. Very, very broad generalization. But once you get the number back, you can say, wow, for me, the majority of my emissions are in my purchased goods and services. And specifically, it's in meat or in flour, because that has a pretty high emissions factor, or whatever else. Another big chunk is my Scope 2 emissions, my energy use, or my employee commute. These are all big chunks in typical restaurants. Which one can I afford to focus on? Which one do I want to focus on? Which one can I focus on? So you might say, okay, obviously meat is my biggest emitter. I'm not getting rid of that, and I don't have the headspace to bring in a Beyond Burger option, and I can't deal with local farms. I just can't do that this year. Let me focus on my employee commute. Let me make some progress there. Let me give everyone a bus pass for working here. Let me encourage them let me build out a bike lock outside in the back that's like super safe and secure. Encourage people to take their bikes. Or let me focus on energy. Can I switch to renewable energy, which is actually often a lot easier and more profitable than you might think it would be? Like, what changes can you make? But it starts with measurement so you can get a good grasp of where you're at.
How hard is it to measure these things? I know people listening to this who want to make a conscious effort to be better.
Yeah.
They're getting an anxiety attack right now listening to this, thinking like, I have to do this on top of working an 80-hour week.
Yeah.
Like,
so that you have a couple of options.
Right.
You can do it yourself. It's free. And it takes more time, so you can like Google EPA carbon footprint calculator. The EPA has a good one, big spreadsheet. You pull all this data, you got to do it all yourself, and you get a number. And it's not a number that's good enough to give to a private equity firm or an investor, but it's a number that's good enough to start with. So you can do that. It's free. That'll probably take you 20, 30 hours over the course of however long you want to like pull it all together.
I think it's also important too that this is a very delegatable thing.
And for sure, the CEO should not be like,
right. Like if
you give this to an operator, you give this to a marketer, you give this to an
isn't-
HR person, you give this to somebody, what's called a green team, just someone younger who cares about
AGM,
sustainability.
somebody, yeah, exactly.
Hey, here's a challenge. Do it well, and like someone ambitious, whatever. So you don't like this is not the CEO's job ever,
Right.
or the operators. So you can do that. You can hire a consultant. They'll make it easy for you. They'll kind of do a lot
How
of
much
the
do you
work.
budget for? Like,
They'll guide you through. It depends a lot on the size of the business.
can you give me some ballparks? Depending
Yeah,
on different
let's say you're
organizational sizes?
let's go small, medium, large, 10 locations, 100 locations, 1,000 locations. If you're a 10 location business, you probably should not be spending more than like, I don't know, maximum $30,000 on like a really, really good software to do this stuff really, really well. You could also probably get something for $5,000 to $10,000. That's fine.
What
If
are
you're
those softwares that you would? Is that
so it's one of the things I do. Not to push it, but GreenPlaces is one
for
option.
the record? I did not know this. This is not plugged. This is
Wasn't going to
purely
mention it until you
organic.
asked.
Yeah.
So like whatever. There's other softwares out there, and you could just Google carbon accounting software and find whatever you find.
Yeah.
And so that's got that option. If you have 100 locations, maybe you're going to be spending $50,000 to $150,000 depending on complexity and size and things like that. And if you got 1,000 locations, you're probably going to be spending between $100,000 and $500,000 on this kind of thing. But that should be all encompassing. It's going to measure the emissions, it's going to help you reduce emissions, it's going to give you access to buying renewable energy credits. It's going to be a sophisticated sustainability
Yeah,
program.
it's probably going to take all the research away because I would imagine it would be very step by step.
Yeah,
here's the first thing.
yeah.
Here's the second thing. Kind of like,
And it protects you as well. Right. So like I talk a lot in the book, and it's also very important for consumer-facing businesses, especially to understand the term greenwashing. Have you heard? Do you know what greenwashing
it's this
is?
idea that you you project this image of being sustainable for the sole appeal to consumers.
Yeah. And
you're not really doing it.
And it sounds malicious, and sometimes it is. Sometimes people they call it a green sheen. They're basically like, oh, if I can pretend like I'm sustainable, everyone will like that. It's not always malicious. Like really big airline, Delta just got sued over greenwashing. Keurig, I mentioned earlier, Ryanair got sued over this. Like really big companies do this unintentionally. Small companies might do it by accident or on purpose, but like you just don't want to get this stuff wrong. And if you work with an external partner or consultant or a software or whatever, anytime you say anything about sustainability, which hopefully you say a lot and you educate people and you talk about it and it's part of your marketing plan or whatever, you can say and you point to them and say, here's how I know. Like, here's the partner we worked with. Here's the report. Here's the math that we did. Here's what we got real data over.
It takes on the liability off of the restaurant because there's a process. So this is kind of similar to if you need some type of system put in place for sexual harassment or harassment in general. As long as you can point to some system and say, hey, when this happens, we have a system. Our employees have been trained on this. They signed off on it. If you have that system in place and you educate your staff on that system, then you kind of take the liability off. It's just like one of those. I'm assuming it's similar to that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You want to be able to say, this is a difficult topic, and I'm doing what I can around it, and here's what that looks like, and here's who I am trusting.
You got to prove that you're making an effort.
Yeah, that's right. And when you're hiring these people, actually, today is what's today? September 12th. I posted on LinkedIn like 10 questions to ask your carbon accounting vendor before hiring them. So you can Google my name and find that post from September 12th. And like there's a whole list. It's also in the book, but like there's a list of questions like you don't want to be sold by a good salesperson. You want to be able to push back and ask questions. But it's things like what protocol do you follow? How do you think about the difference between primary data and secondary data? How difficult is this going to be? Like, have you worked with investors before? Whatever, list of questions. You want to make sure that you're getting something good because sustainability is complicated, and you want to use that as a huge business advantage, not a cost center. And it starts with getting really good data. You don't want to overdo it. You got a whole business to run and food to
What
buy
if you have
and sell.
less than 10 locations?
Usually, I don't know. Then you probably don't need something very sophisticated, honestly. Like
plug the book, Adriel.
Buy the book. Great. If you're a small business, like the goal of this book, Attainable Sustainability, Building Your Corporate Climate Strategy, coming to an Amazon or bookstore near you in like October-ish, is basically to say like, here's what you do. Like, if you want to do a good job, here's where you start. If you want to do an okay job because you're a small business, you got other things to do. Here's how you do an okay job. If you want to do an amazing job because you want to be like Just Salad and become a benefit corporation, a B Corp, and lean into this really hard and put it on your homepage, like here's how you be really gung-ho. If you want to just do this because you're backed by a private equity firm, like here's what they want to know. And here's, if you want to raise money, like I try to cover all those things and say it is a spectrum. You can be crazy gung-ho. You can just be compliant. But it is a journey. You don't have to do the whole thing in a year either.
I secretly can't stand B Corps.
Tell me more.
All right. I love the idea.
Juicy.
I love the idea of B Corps. Don't get me wrong. I think that they're great. I think that they mean well, but I think all businesses should hold themselves to that standard. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, why do we have to create a separate
Yeah, but I think it's
structure?
because businesses won't hold themselves. I think businesses need a marker. They need to know if I reach that certification, I'm good. And B Corp is a certification. B Corp says, yeah, you did all this stuff, you're good. Otherwise, if there was no B Corp, what would they say? Like, I'm a good C Corp? Like,
I get it.
It's very relevant because there's a huge conversation. I talk about this in the book as well, about like corporate carbon accounting, the stuff we're talking about, is a waste of time.
Right.
And I'll give you the counter argument because I genuinely believe it in parts, is to say, why am I measuring my emissions? Why am I wasting money on consultants? What if instead of giving you $30,000, I gave it all to the environmental defense fund, or I gave it all to some land nonprofit near me. Like, wouldn't that be a better use of my $30,000? And don't. Why would you give a consultant $30,000 if you can give, the seals in the Arctic $30,000? For sure. But businesses need a certification to get to. They need to know that they're doing a good job, because if they are doing a good job, then hopefully there will be plenty of more $30,000 to give to the seals or the EDF or whatever.
I mean, I don't literally hate B Corps. I get why they exist, but it's just, for me, it's just this mindset.
It's annoying that you need certifications for like a pat on the back, like you're doing a good job. And it's really hard to become a B Corp. It takes years. You got to do a bunch of stuff, whatever. But like, wouldn't it be nice?
I know.
Wouldn't it be nice?
Just a little pet peeve of mine, just because I feel like everybody. But I also think every business should do good. Like
should but won't. And it's a good way of saying like, well, we know they did good because they're a B Corp, and we're not sure if maybe the other guys did good too, but like maybe they didn't.
Right.
Maybe they didn't.
I don't know why it bothers me. It just does. But I get it. I get it.
Good. You need antagonists for all things, because it's so easy to be like, hey, here's a certification. It's good. You spend all your money on it. You shouldn't even think about it. Everyone should be the certification. You need the flip side of that to say, is this certification a waste of my time? Right. Can't you just do all the B Corp-ish things without being a B Corp and save yourself the money, the time, the hassle, the whatever?
Exactly. That's kind of where I live.
Probably.
Yeah.
But people want they want stickers, they want stamps, they want
Systems,
they want to be able
processes,
to
procedures, they have their place. I love chaos. What can I say? So what we've covered under measurement is this idea. We talked about the 3 scopes. We talked about where, depending on where you fall, what you can expect to spend and what that looks like, and how it should be delegated. Have we gotten into defining your operational
boundary? That just means that's just like how it's a technical term about how you measure emissions. So it's just saying like, what are my corporate emissions and what is external.
Okay.
So for a restaurant, you might say, oh, I want to include all my energy bills. That's part of my operational boundary, but I don't want to include waste because I share waste with the whole strip mall, and that would just get complicated.
Yeah.
Or you might say, I want to include, I don't want to include my swag that I sell because, like, I sell some T-shirts, but, like, it's not really my core business, and it feels like a headache, and I don't want to include it. So measuring your operational boundaries is something your consultant or your software provider or whatever is going to ask you, like, hey, I see you sell T-shirts at your restaurant. Like, do you want to take ownership over them, or, like, is that going to be a hassle? And you might say, hey, it's a hassle. Like, maybe next year I'll do that. It's just doesn't seem worth it. Yeah. Or maybe you say, yeah, like, part of my business, I should do it.
Got it. So I think we talked about, is there anything we haven't discussed in terms of measure that is important?
The only other thing I'd say, and this is 90% of measure, is measure your carbon footprint. Like, that's 90% of it. Some businesses want to measure other environmental metrics. Like, so you think about Coca-Cola measures water use. Water use is not covered in your carbon footprint very directly, but for Coca-Cola, it's very important for the sustainability program they're called what's water positive.
Is it like 99% of their product is water?
99% of their product is water. They take who knows how many billions of gallons of water out of reservoirs. They want to be able to put water back in, so they measure water. You might measure, I talk about Best Buy has this amazing recycling program, e-waste program. That's not covered in their carbon footprint. It's just the GHG protocol doesn't account for Best Buy's e-waste program. But they want to measure the success of their e-waste program because electronic recycling is really core to their brand. So as your restaurant, you might say, I want to measure something that's just doesn't exist in my corporate carbon footprint, but that's level 5. Like that's for more sophisticated programs that are really thinking beyond the first couple steps.
Got it. If this came out and I missed it, I apologize. But realistically, how much time should we budget for a project like this? If we're saying it's between 10 and 100 locations, or maybe right around that sweet spot.
I'd usually say it should be like 20 man hours of work to do this stuff. I mean,
that's actually less anxiety driving than I thought it would be. Because in my mind,
I'm here to comfort.
Whenever I think of these big projects, I'm like, this is going to be so hard. And like, we end up never doing these things because of the amount of anxiety we experience. We get like emotional around it, like stressed out thinking about it. And it really, if you just start the project, it's not as bad as it sounds.
Here's the right way to do it too. You want to not make it your job because you as an owner operator are very busy. And this should not be the chief anything officer's job. This should be supported and funded by the chief whatever officer. They should join the kickoff call to prove that this matters. They should assign this to somebody lower down in a marketing department, or an operations department, or an HR department, or a finance team. Someone who's going to have access to a lot of internal data. Someone who's hopefully been there for a couple of years, so they have some credibility and can ask other people for things, but not somebody so senior that every hour of theirs is worth $1,000. But they should have your blessing, your trust. They should be able to go to other peers and say, hey, the CEO is asking me to do this. Like, I need you to give me this data. And then you give it to them and you check up on them. And it shouldn't take them and your whole team more than 20 man hours total over the course of 4 to 12 weeks, depending on your size and aggressiveness and things like that.
Got it. Okay. So is it safe to move on to reduce?
We're good.
So we covered measure. What does this project look like, the measure element of this? What does that picture look like when it's done?
So you going to spend your 4 to 12 weeks or whatever collecting all this data. Let's say you work with an external partner, a software company, or a consultant. That's more common. They're going to tell you what to collect. You're going to collect all this data, your kilowatt hours of your restaurant, how much you spent on meat last year, how far your employees commute, whatever. You're going to give it to them. They're going to go back 6, 8, 10 weeks, crunch some numbers, and they're going to come back to you with your carbon footprint. The good ones are going to give you a report that says, here's how we calculated this. Here's the transparency. Here's the emissions that come from your refrigerators. Here's the emissions that come from your employee commute. Here's your total carbon emissions as a business. Here's your emissions per location. They might do things like, hey, here's your energy use or energy emissions per restaurant location. Here's who's super energy efficient. Here's who's super energy inefficient, and it's costing you a lot of money. So they're basically going to come back and say, here's your carbon emissions total. Here's how they break down in different categories and per restaurant and things like that. And lastly, here's opportunities you have to improve that.
Got it.
And then the rest of your year is improving that. That's the reduce side of it.
Yeah.
That's
So you get the numbers, you have your measurables, your reference points, and then you try to make those points move.
And you try to make those points move. Exactly.
So
you can't know what direction you want those points to move without knowing what those points are.
And I love that you cover, under reduce, we have the company internal, and this whole like external thing I think is really cool. But get into the company internal versus external, like that.
Yeah.
However you would tackle reduce, get after it.
Yeah. So internal emissions are what shows up on your carbon footprint, right? You know your footprint. It's 20,000 metric tons of what's called CO2e, carbon dioxide equivalents. Whatever, just a number that adds up all the stuff that you did last year. It's measured over an annual basis. How do I make that number go down? Can I switch to renewable energy? Can I sell less meat? Can I get all my employees a bicycle? Can I switch to a different refrigerant, which are super pollutant? What can I do to make my number go down?
Right.
That's reducing internal emissions. Reducing stakeholder emissions is helping your customers, mostly customers for a restaurant, but also employees, reduce emissions in ways that are not going to show up on your carbon footprint. So I'll give you a customer example, and I'll give you an employee example. An employee example, that comes to mind first, is if you have employees who work from home, oftentimes their work from home emissions are not going to show up on your carbon footprint.
Right.
If I have all my corporate employees in my big 1,000-person employee restaurant group work from home 4 days a week, their energy use, their waste, their whatever is not going to show up on my footprint. But many restaurants might say, I care about that. That's an external stakeholder emission, but I want to help that go down. Can I help fund, for every year my employee has been here, I will give an extra $500 towards solar panels on their house, or I will buy a composter for every employee on their 1-year anniversary, or whatever. Those are emissions that are external. They're your stakeholder emissions. It's just pushing the full system to get better, even if it's not going to show up on your carbon footprint. Does that make sense?
Yes.
The customer example could be similar. So a customer example might be, the Best Buy e-cycling program is a good example. Or, hey, drop off your laptop. We're just going to do something better for the world that's not going to show up on our emissions. Or a T-shirt store near me called Marine Layer. For every cotton T-shirt you bring in, you get $5 off of one of their T-shirts, because they actually take those T-shirts and upcycle it and bring that fabric back. Your restaurant can do similar things. You can have canned goods drop off. You can just help your customers or your landlord or whomever, help your suppliers. Actually, that's a really good example for restaurants, is suppliers. So what your suppliers do is often not going to show up directly on your carbon footprint. But let's say you buy 100,000 pounds of napkins every year. And you can go to your napkin vendor and you can say, hey, I really care about sustainability. One of my big efforts this year is to push my suppliers to care about sustainability as well. Can you ship your napkins on trucks instead of by plane? Can you become a carbon neutral supplier of
Can we
napkins?
bring trains back?
Can we bring train? And in Europe, you can bring it back hard. In America, we got a ways
The
to
rail
go.
system used to be so amazing in
Yeah,
this country. Like
that's another
beyond our
podcast,
lifetime.
man.
Oh my god,
That would be wonderful.
But we abandoned it for the road system.
Imagine that was an Eisenhower thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, that bastard.
I mean, hindsight's always 2020.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the great American
But the
road trip.
rail trails are there. The trails are there. Just put tracks back.
We
down.
just got to put tracks back. Amtrak is also so expensive.
Right.
Like, it's the cost of a flight. And it's not always,
But it's way better than flying. Dude.
it takes, like, if you're going like New York to DC, for example, it takes 3 hours instead of flying, which is sure an hour and a half flight, but like going to the airport, whatever else, it's better. You can walk around.
I mean, I'm kind of spoiled. The Amtrak literally stops in my backyard.
Oh, look at you.
I'm like 70 strides. I'm not going to tell you which stop I'm at because I'm a little worried.
Then 70 strides in any direction, we'll find you.
So, this is kind of goes back to the idea again, going back to Matt Pepsel, the author of Expand Your Circle. The reduce really is part of that's like the expanding your circle. That's saying, hey, if we're gonna do this, it has to be a group effort. It's me, the owner. It's you, the employee. It's the stakeholders. It's everyone associated with our business. And what can we do to ripple out and to influence others? Hey,
right.
we want to do business with you. Can you meet these standards? And if everybody does that, watch how. And this is why I love consumerism, because it's about options. But the consumer drives the market, and this is why I think the restaurant industry is so integral, because we are influencers.
I don't know if there's a industry at all that interacts with its customers more often than
None.
That like you have so much. The last chapter of the book is called Power Wielding,
Right.
and it's basically saying that like. You should do all the stuff. You should measure your emissions.
Right.
You should reduce emissions. You should report on the stuff you market. You should do all that stuff. But businesses need to do what's called power wielding, which means pushing the entire system to change.
Right.
Push them in policy, pushing your customers. And restaurants, like the fact that if you just put up a little thing on your menu, which like Elefante in Los Angeles is a cool restaurant, and they have a QR code on their menu that talks about sustainability stuff. If you could put a little plastic thing by the checkout register, if you work with Lightspeed, the payments processor,
Yep.
which works with a ton of restaurants, you can actually add carbon offsets as an optional thing to.
So there's a
There's
path of
things
least or a path of least resistance for
yeah,
right now.
that doesn't cost you anything. Like it's just engaging your
Right.
suppliers or your customers or teaching them, like Chipotle. Every time
Right.
you order Chipotle and you get a receipt, and you order it in the app, I think mostly, but you got a receipt in your email, and it says on the bottom of your email the carbon footprint of your order and how much water it used, and it's just like a little educational moment that cost them $0. Like once they figured out the math, like $0 incremental dollars, and it costs you the same. But like I see Chipotle as a sustainable brand and one that I would choose over Dos Toros. Because Chipotle might not be more sustainable, I really don't know. But they talk about it, they care about it, they educate me, like they interact with me. You just have restaurants have such a center of gravity around this stuff.
Well, I think what excites me the most, thinking about the influence, and people listening to this might be thinking to themselves, consumers are so lazy. They're never going to do this stuff. And I think that's not necessarily true, because they'll do it if they know what's in it for them.
They'll do it also if it's like, fine, consumers are lazy, so make it easy for them.
They're selfish too. Like, let's be honest, human nature, we're selfish, we're lazy, we try to save energy. It's just in our nature, I feel like, to save energy and to take a path of least resistance, or we're not going to do anything until we know that it directly affects me and benefits me. We're selfish by nature, I think.
Yeah.
There's sorry, go ahead.
There's this business professor named Scott Galloway, who's like an NYU marketing professor and a big podcaster. And I took one of his classes once, and he talks about how every consumer decision is driven by one of three things: the brain, the heart, or the genitals. Either you're buying something because it's a smart thing to do and it'll make you more money. That's the brain.
Benefit.
You're buying something because it makes you feel good.
Right.
That's my charitable donation.
Benefit.
Or like
Yeah.
I buy whatever. Or you're buying something for your genitals because it makes you sexy.
Right.
Like it's you look good in a Ferrari.
It's gonna get you laid.
It's gonna get you laid. Like a Gucci purse makes you awesome. Whatever
My
the
genes
thing.
go on.
Yeah.
Legacy.
Like it's just brain, heart, genitals. And
Right.
It breaks it down. It's like easy thing to remember from a marketing professor. That's why he's a good marketing professor. Does things that are easy to remember. But like it's the same thing here. Like
Right.
think about your customers. They're buying something for the brain, for their heart, or for their genitals. They're eating at your restaurant for the brain because they know it's good for them. For the heart because like it's warm and fuzzy and they like your vibe, or for the genitals because if they eat out at whatever 11 Madison.
Dude,
Like they think it'll
You're
be good for
reinforcing
them.
the point I want to make, and I think it hits all of those. It hits the brain, it hits the heart, and it hits the genitals. Because at the end of the day, if like when you what will make people take action when they know there's something in it for them, and what they're starting to realize is that when you do the sustainable thing, when you eat food that is grown sustainably, it's better for you. You know, and I think that once you start to like communicate, listen, like not only is it better for you, your brain, it makes you feel better, your heart, but also when you spend money and you're maybe 1 or 2 points removed from the beneficiary of that effort that you made, and you get to see the impact that you're having on your community and other people who are close to you, not some way, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of miles away. It makes you feel good. You know that your money is making an impact. Yeah. And then when you eat good and you're good to other people, you get laid.
Yeah. All the time, constantly. Yeah.
You know, it's good. You know, like that's attractive. You know? Maybe I'm stretching that last part.
No, for sure. It's guaranteed easy money. My example of this, have you heard of a company called Mill?
No.
So their website is mill.co,
yeah.
And I love them. I want to be their spokesperson if they're looking for them. Mill.co was started by the founders of Nest, that home thermostat company that sold to Google for $1 trillion. And imagine if Apple designed a garbage can. So it's this beautiful white compost bin. So the problems with composting in your home is that it's smelly and it's gross and it's this ugly bag and there's flies everywhere and you take the bag out and it breaks and whatever. And people still pay $25 a month for that, and depending on your city, because you want to, because it's good for the heart and it just feels good. Mill is like $33 a month or something like that. And I got this thing and like I posted it on LinkedIn and it was awesome. And it's this like beautiful garbage can that's got this technology in there that grinds up all the food you throw in.
I have heard this.
It's awesome. It's so awesome. It's got this like charcoal thing, so it covers the scent, so it doesn't smell at all. It closes automatically, so you're never gonna get flies in there. And they partner with USPS to pick up your compost, because I live in Brooklyn. I don't have a backyard to use it on. They pick up this compost and they send it to a chicken farm, and they use it as chicken feed. Oh my God, brain, heart, genitals. Like, it's smart. I know I'm doing the right thing for the planet. It makes me feel warm and fuzzy. I whatever. And then like, it's awesome. Like, it's cool to care about climate. It's just that like people care about it. Young people care about it. People like rich people care about it. Your customers care about it. If they see that stuff, it makes them feel good.
And I think we're also guilty of being linear thinkers. And we look at the world we live in now and say like, this is too much work. There's too much resistance to do this. There's too much friction in the way. There's too many hoops to jump through. But what's really cool is that we live in a world that's exponentially evolving. Culture evolves exponentially. And we can't forget that. And when there's a shift in culture, it's like it blows out like the limits of like basically it spurs innovation. It spurs opportunity. And you see these companies like Mill and like all these creative people find solutions, and it's good for market. And that's capitalism. You know?
And companies that stay ahead of it just do better.
Yeah. So I guess earlier I was you started off in the book saying that it started with consumers, and these corporations were saying, hey, we're just giving the consumers what they want. And then the corporations will, well, no, it's our responsibility. But I kind of think that it's the consumer responsibility, but I think it's kind of yes. And it's our responsibility to influence the consumer so they can make good purchasing decisions.
Exactly. I think not that long ago, it was very difficult for a consumer to make a good decision.
They didn't have the information.
They didn't have the information, and they didn't have the options. Because no restaurants are vegetarian options, and
they were being lied to. Let's be honest.
Whatever.
But it's harder than ever to lie today
for sure.
than ever before.
And now, as a consumer, I can go into the most sustainable. I can go to a Just Salad. I can go into a whatever B Corp restaurant you want, and I could pick the meat option.
Yeah.
I don't think actually Just Salad doesn't sell steak, so that's something they like drew a line on and said, we don't sell steak, we sell chicken, but like no steak. Or I can go into a Taco Bell, and this is the cool thing that Taco Bell did, is to say, we're going to have a veggie mode on the iPad that our customers are ordering on, and they made it really easy, and you just tap veggie mode, and it automatically substitutes, instead of whatever ground beef or whatever they normally serve, it substitutes in for like a sweet potato tater tot or black beans or whatever. And that product has crushed for them. It's done so well because they didn't say, we're not going to serve meat anymore. They just said, we're going to make it really easy and really delicious for you to choose that option. And sometimes when I go to Taco Bell, I get the ground beef, whatever. And sometimes when I go, I just click veggie mode and I get the delicious sweet potato thing. It's about giving people the option. We already have the information. Everyone knows there's nothing new in understanding your impact on the climate. Eat less meat, try to fly a little less, like try to use solar panels if you can. Like, it's all very obvious. It's just about giving options. And there's certain things consumers cannot do. So in airline travel, if I travel, I have to take a plane. Like, my wife's family's from Kansas City. I'm not walking to Kansas City. I'm not taking my bicycle. I'm not taking Amtrak. I'm not even driving to save emissions.
Right.
I'm going to fly there. There's nothing I can do about that except United Airlines allows me to add $3 to the cost of my ticket to fund their research in sustainable aviation fuel, which is something a company has to do to move towards a cleaner way of travel. So there's certain things that only companies can do. I can go to a restaurant and I can choose veggie mode over beef, but I can't make them have renewable energy.
Yeah.
That's something only the restaurant can do. So it's always going to be my choice whether or not I want to play their game, but you've got to give me a game to play.
Right. So we've covered the first.
We've covered so much. Is there anything left?
Frame.
We read the book to them. This is my audiobook right here. This is it.
Hey, you're just I'll send you the recording.
Yeah,
give you
yes.
credit.
Yeah, put it upload to Audible. Easy money.
So we covered measure. We covered reduce. I think we kind of indirectly covered communicate. But why don't you just kind of actually now's a good time to thank our sponsors. We'll come right back to officially unpackage communicate, and then we'll just kind of kick around some ideas because I just want to have fun talking to you a little bit more before we say goodbye. We still got time too.
Perfect. Thank you, sponsor.
Yeah, we'll be right back.
We have to interrupt today's video to let you know that right now Restaurant Systems Pro is offering a no strings attached 60-day trial that will help you improve your systems, increase your profit, and find better work-life balance. All you have to do is click the link below.
We're back. So we covered measure, we covered reduce, and we've kind of indirectly talked about communicate, but really just officially unpackage that communicate. What are the elements there?
So communicate has two categories. You have required reporting and you have voluntary marketing. Required reporting is going to matter more for larger businesses. Your private equity firm might require that you tell them your carbon footprint. If you want to ever go public, the SEC will require that you report this stuff. If you want to launch in an airport, that airport has a sustainability policy, they will require that you know this stuff. They're just like rules that you have to follow. If you want to serve Microsoft or Salesforce, maybe you have a catering arm and you want to serve them, they have rules. Salesforce in particular, one of the largest tech companies on earth, has what's called the Sustainable Vendor Policy that says that they will not buy products from businesses that don't have their carbon footprint. So required reporting. You want to sell to Salesforce, you want to sell to the federal government, you want to have private equity money, you have to do certain things.
Got it.
Voluntary marketing is really important because that's where a lot of the ROI, especially for consumer businesses like restaurants, comes from.
Yeah.
But it's also quite a minefield, right? If you're a restaurant and you're doing all the work of sustainability, you want to tell your customers, you want to tell your employees.
It's not cheap.
It's not cheap, right? You got to think about the stuff. Like you gotta bring it into a campaign. You gotta think about how to do this correctly. You gotta avoid greenwashing. You gotta if you want to be carbon neutral, like that's awesome, but you want to make sure you're talking about quality carbon offsets or whatever else.
Your brand almost has, maybe not center around this, but it has to be a big part of your brand. I think, in my personal opinion,
it can be
appeal to the right market
that
will, be your evangelist, that will support you because they identify with your values. You got to put it out into the universe in order for people to be aware that you're making the effort, and people are going to associate and identify with that. You can't just do it and hope that through, going through the motions of
is enough. Yeah.
I think
there's a spectrum. So I'll be fair. Like I'll say on the one end of the spectrum is a company super leading in sustainability, Sweet Green, Just Salad. There's a cool UK chain called Oaxaca Tacos.
Yeah.
Like they lean it. That is their brand all over their store and menu and website. It says that stuff.
You have to, it's going to be more expensive to eat at your restaurant if you do all this stuff, if you have these values.
You'll get a certain kind of customer and they'll pay $1 more.
But they need to know why it's more expensive.
They'll need to know why. And you have to be transparent.
Right.
A little further down the spectrum, like I think Condado Tacos is pretty cool. They're like 40 or so locations around the Midwest. Like they don't blast it off the rooftop, so they post it on Instagram a little bit and like they talk about this at conferences. And on the far end of the spectrum, I won't name them because they don't want to talk about it, but like companies who just want to do it because they should do it and they feel like doing it and like they're just gonna do it and like maybe they'll tell their employees or maybe they'll do it at an all hands, but like they're not gonna really like blast it. So I recommend talking about it. I think it'll be around longer. It'll be more sustainable in the like business sense of the word. Look, if you want to make sure you're doing it well for a couple years before you ever talk about it, or if you've got other marketing goals that just aren't aligned with sustainability, or if it would never fit your brand,
Right.
like I don't know, if you're if you're a steakhouse, I'm still trying to figure out how to sell to a steakhouse. Like, yeah, all right, you get your meat locally. Like, do you want to be a sustainable steakhouse? Is that a hard thing? Like, you should probably just like do the stuff on the background and like just because it's the right thing and,
Right.
and whatever. But yeah, there's a spectrum. I recommend leaning in thoughtfully and with patience and doing it the right way. But
I think
you don't have
also it's almost like you're responsible if you're doing these things. I think it's also the communication is part of how we influence and we change consumer behavior. You know, like there was when people really started leaning into this like 10 years ago, right? There was a lot of consumer pushback, like $10 for a burger. Are you kidding me? We also conditioned the consumer to think that $5 for a burger was a good deal. But that's not sustainable to do that. So like I think through promoting and telling the universe why you do what you do, you're also influencing and changing the perspective. I spent $25 on a frozen chicken that I get at this farm because one, I know the owners and I love knowing that I'm supporting a friend in a local business, and two, I don't like supporting a broken food system. And I also eat way less meat when I spend $25 on a chicken.
Yeah.
Because I fill my belly with, kale because it's way less.
Yeah. You know what? Butcher Box does a very good job of this. You know Butcher Box?
I've heard of them, but I didn't know that they...
Big business. They're like a $500 million subscription, $500 million revenue subscription food business. Yeah. And they started doing grass-fed meat maybe 10, 15 years ago or something like that. And all I saw was grass-fed meat because grass-fed beef was really hard to find. And then they expanded and did like salmon, like wild caught salmon instead of farm raised salmon and whatever, free range chicken and all these other things. And they do a really good job of this. They're like, yeah, we sell meat, we sell chicken, we sell fish. We ship it to you in boxes around the country.
Do they ship it to you by airplane or by ground?
They ship it to you by airplane. They do, which is not ideal. Like they say, like that's the stuff. Like
it's not so cut and dry though. Like you know what I mean? Like it's this whole thing.
If you want grass-fed beef, there is none on Long Island. So the only way to get it is from whatever farm in Oklahoma. Like you want it or you don't want it. At the moment, that's what you got to do. Right. They're trying to fund. They tell you about it. Here's why we do what we do. Here's what it looks like. Here's all the stuff we're trying to do around our packaging. Here's what it means when we talk about regenerative agriculture. They like educate you and build a really big business serving high-end customers who really care about this stuff, who go out and buy $25 chickens like you do. Seems like an irrational thing. Who would ever pay more for a similar product? Like a billion people would happily pay more for a product that they know is good, know where it comes from, whatever.
Well, I think there's a shift in values, you know, and I think that's what I think there has to be a shift in values in order to execute this future that we're envisioning right now, right? But I think that's literally happening. You're seeing it in Gen X and Gen Z, not Gen X, millennials and Gen Z, and Gen X too, probably a little bit, right? People are making consumer shifts. Yeah. I think a little bit selfishly because they want to identify with being progressive and thoughtful, but also health-wise. Some of the
There's this crazy. I just want to so two things around the like young people care that we didn't talk much about employees,
right?
So I'll really briefly mention this thing. So employees really care about this. It's a great place to find ROI. Your young employees who work in the food system want to know that you're doing sustainability well. I show this chart in the book. It was a Deloitte study of what employees care about, and it showed what Gen Z and millennials is specifically focusing on younger employees. And for Gen Z, climate change was the number one issue. It beat out everything else. It beat out comp. It beat out DEI. It beat out gender. Everything. Like it beat out people cared about climate change. And for millennials, I think it was third after like healthcare and something else. Like young people care about this. You will be able to hire more of them if you lean into it.
Right.
The second thing I wanted to say is like young people care dramatically. I don't know if you've been following this. It was Michigan or Minnesota. Minnesota, I think. Young people sued the state of Minnesota on behalf of the environment and said the environment is protected in our Constitution. Now I'm trying to remember what state it was. North Dakota. Gosh, I should get this right. But you could just Google like young people lawsuit of a state. Young people sued their state because in the Constitution they wanted it protected, the environment, and they said all this drilling and oil exploration that's happening is literally breaking the Constitution. Yeah. They won. This was like a month ago. They won. They beat the state. Awesome. They like shut down oil drills. It is insane the level that people are going to.
Future.
It's like pick your
30 years. These are going to be the governors, the mayors,
Yeah. And like right now, they're your rich customers because you have to be rich to
Yeah.
care about climate to an extent. You got other problems if you're not rich. So if you want people who are spending disposable income or whatever, like they just care about the environment.
Right. You bring up I'm happy that you resurfaced this because I wanted to make a point earlier when we were talking about measure. The cool thing that happens when you measure, and it ties into the great game of business, this idea of gamifying business, but you also get to gamify your carbon footprint. And you get it's one more metric to measure, to have fun with it, and to say, hey, like last year, we reduced our carbon footprint to this number. Next year, let's make our goal this number, and then you challenge, and then you can use that stat to compare yourself to other restaurants or organizations, and use that, but just being able to gamify it and to get your people to buy in and to literally let them measure the impact they're making through their efforts. When you can gamify something, it's just a whole new game in terms of culture and how to get people to buy in. It's powerful.
Can I tell you
They care.
idea for your listeners
Please.
that'll actually save them a bunch of money on exactly that?
Yeah.
So scope 2 emissions,
Okay.
purchase electricity, we talk about. So one way you can collect all that data really easily with a software provider is they'll plug into your utilities and they'll show you a cool view on whatever app they have that says, here's the amount of energy used by each of your restaurant locations, and here's how to think about it per square foot. Here's the data normalized in whatever way. And you'll find, let's say you have 20 restaurants. Oftentimes, I've seen this now at dozens of different restaurants, you'll find that you will have your restaurants basically broken into quartiles of energy efficiency. And oftentimes, your bottom quartile, so your least energy efficient location, will cost you 8 times more money than your top quartile.
Really?
Meaning your energy inefficient locations are costing you 8 times more money than your energy efficient locations. And oftentimes for a restaurant, utilities might be like 3 or 5% of your total costs. So that's like adding 1 or 2 percentage points to your bottom line if you're able to reduce that. So once you have that information and you can see, all right, here's where it's broken up, you can do things like create a competition and email every single restaurant, and a good software provider will make this all automated for you. We can email every single restaurant manager and say, last year you were ranked 13th out of 20, or last month you were ranked 13th out of 20. If you can get to ranking 11th out of 20, we will give you a bonus, and we will just give you the money you saved on energy, and you can give it out to your employees or do whatever you want with it.
Profit sharing.
Profit sharing. Or you can do things like, hey, let's have a webinar where restaurants 1 and 2 are most energy efficient restaurants are just going to talk about the things that that all the restaurants can be doing better. And let's see how high up we can get restaurants 19 and 20. And the things we will find are also insane. Like, yeah, you'll think of the obvious ones. If you have a restaurant in Minnesota versus one in Florida, what you'll be doing during the winter is very different. Right. Fine, sure, there's that kind of stuff. But also we've seen things like one restaurant was paying the energy bill of their neighbor, and just no one ever noticed until you're looking at energy efficiency. Like,
so it forces you to drill down.
Yeah. One restaurant, they found that the manager would open the door every morning and he would tie it to the wall because the door's kind of janky and like people had a tough time opening it a little bit. So instead of fixing it for $500, he would just leave it open. The air conditioner and heater worked twice as hard, and he was wasting an extra like $300 a month. Jesus. And when they found that out, they're like, "Oh, let's fix your door for $5." Like, let's just fix your door. One restaurant found that the manager was turning on the backup oven every single morning immediately, even though it was just a backup oven
because it was cold. Yeah.
So just they went around and turned on all the stuff. Like,
what gets measured gets minded.
Yeah. If all of a sudden you're like, hey, how do I make my number go down?
It's crazy how that works.
Should I not turn on my backup oven until I need it? Or maybe I'll just turn it on at noon instead of at 6 a.m.?
Right.
Like,
but what's cool is when you gamify it and you bring the team in, you get this, like you tap into like the infinite, right? Because you get all these different perspectives, and it's that brain power that you're tapping into that you would never otherwise would have given yourself that privilege to get access to. I think we can start to wrap it up. Before we officially start to wrap it up, this is just me getting silly again. I'm just curious. So I believe 100% that humans contribute to global warming. I want to get that out before people think that I'm a crazy
Excellent.
person.
That's good. I wish we got that.
Let's just make that out of the way before I get labeled as a
yeah.
conspiracy theorist or something. But I do also believe that the world, I think, relative to our perspective in this moment in time, is constantly fluctuating, right?
Sure.
The more we learn about like the history of this planet and the like the crazy experiences between like the 5 or 6 super volcanoes that exist, the amount of times it's gotten hit by asteroids, that no matter how bad it gets, it's going to get like, I do believe that this planet has the ability to shake us off like a bad set of fleas.
Yeah.
You know, and that we're just going to go right back to an ice age eventually. It's just a matter of time. Whether,
Sure.
you know, like,
well, I think sustainability is not about, I think the planet doesn't care. Like, the planet will be fine. The planet, like, will all die in some sort of natural disaster, and then the planet will burp, and 100 years later, it'll all be fine. And it'll just, like, you know, sorry polar bears, sorry humans, sorry penguins, whatever, you're all extinct. It'll be fine. A couple thousand years later, other species will all show up. Like, yeah, fine. Protect human species. Like,
Right.
it's just, you don't want it happening
Honestly,
faster. You don't want it happening this often. You don't want Hawaiian fires happening more and more often. You don't want Canadian fires happening earlier in the season and blowing smoke all over New York City, which I've never seen in my entire life, and destroying
Right.
business for 4 days.
Right.
You don't want there to be not snow on Christmas for years and years in New York City, which like ruins tourism because
Right.
who wants to go to New York over Christmas
Right.
if there's not going to be snow.
Also, like what's happening in Hawaii right now, like that, I'm sorry, it's a tragedy what's
Yeah.
happening out there in Hawaii.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like we look at that and go, oh, like this is so sad. How could this happen? I don't know. Maybe like human power lines causing a fire. You know what I'm saying?
Utilities. Well, it happens.
We're responsible for
Yeah,
it. Like
yeah.
we act like victims.
Yeah.
Like, oh, like how could this happen to us? It's like because we kind of suck
And
we
even
don't
the
realize
natural
it.
stuff, like, you know, Canadian wildfires, right? It happened in June.
Right.
So my daughter was born June 1st, and by June 5th, we could not leave the house for 4 days because it was
Right.
that smoky outside in New York City. And Canadian wildfires are healthy. They're natural. They happen all the time. You need them to happen. It's just the way things burn, and it's
Right.
great. It happened earlier in the season. It happened more ferociously than ever before. Like temperatures were hotter, everything was drier, and the economy was ruined. So don't take feel free to take an economic perspective. Right. People's health was hurt, so take a healthcare perspective. Like, take whatever perspective you want.
Right.
Wildfires happening earlier and earlier, right. more frequently and more frequently, bigger and bigger. That affects your business. That affects your health. That kills people. Like, I don't know. Pick your argument for figuring this stuff out. And I also, like, your business, the first words to chapter 8 in the book is nothing that we talked about in the first 7 chapters matters. Your business won't save the planet. Right. It is a piece. It is a small piece of this massive, massive thing.
It's a drip in an ocean.
And you could ignore your drip. Like, well, I'm a drip in an ocean. What can I do? Or you can fix your freaking drip, and hopefully you'll affect some others.
Yeah, and influence other people to fix their drips. And over time, every one of those drips becomes a new ocean because of influence, right? But I just think it's kind of weird how we don't take any accountability. Like humans, like we collectively trying to take this victim approach. Like, oh, this is so sad. Like, how could this happen? It's like, because we're doing crazy shit.
It's always someone else's problem.
Right. But I think for me, it's not about even the future of humans, because humans are directly responsible for this. But for me, it's like we share this planet with other species. And like for me, like right now, we're being so incredibly selfish to every other species that's alive for our convenience. And it literally comes down to human convenience. So we can have hot showers or whatever like luxury that we have in today's modern world. And we kind of just do it at like the expense of like, oh, those other living species are less significant creatures. Like, you know, to me, like just that for me is a reason, because right now, like we're stewards of this planet. We're self-aware creatures. You know, we have the ability to make a difference. And for me, it's like not even doing it for like our own future, but just to share this planet with other creatures. And right now to like be more holistic, right? It's all connected, you know, like, I don't know.
The thing I remember this forever. The thing that got me into sustainability was the TV show Planet Earth. You know Planet Earth with David Attenborough? Yeah, like just beautiful nature documentary that's like insane.
And they kind of put things into perspective.
Yeah, it just shows you the craziest shit. So like that, I remember watching that in college and be like, oh my God, like the planet, the animals, the whatever. Right. And I still buy all that stuff. Like I'm in the middle of Our Planet 2, the second season of this other, like I love the nature stuff. I think it's a good argument for some. And the Save the Polar Bears thing is like where the sustainability movement was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree with you more, Eric, but like also most people don't give a shit about polar bears. They're like, oh, like actually literally today as I was walking down the elevator to get to you here, the like news flash on the WeWork thing was that emperor penguins might become extinct.
Oh my gosh.
And because of melting ice caps and like not whatever, something like that. It's very sad. I love animals, and I'm very sad about that. Nobody gives a shit. Like, they'll just forget. They'll move on. They're not going to change their habits. Like, you need to have a financial
Right.
And the financial, if you want to take a financial metric of that, what happens if the emperor penguins go away? Well, certain fish will overpopulate. What happens if that happens? Certain plants will go away entirely, and you will lose
They won't care until they
a product on your restaurant menu.
Exactly.
Like that's it.
Right.
That's what will happen. Or like certain fish will overpopulate. They'll eat the salmon, and salmon will no longer be alive, and you'll lose your $35 halibut eventually. Like, I talk about the profit motive all the time, not to be cold or not to whatever, just because like that's what translates into action. Maybe I talk about the penguins and someone donates $50 to the penguins. Yeah, the honey. My first business when I was in middle school and high school, I sold honey.
Yeah.
And I talked at conferences and stuff about honeybees in like 2000.
Butterflies.
I don't know, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, whatever. Yeah, I love it.
It's all directed to food. It's all connected with food.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
And that, I think, again, and we forget that food is life.
Yeah.
The majority of things, with maybe the exception of salt, that we consume was once from a living thing. You know, and like, that is enough reason for us to be selfish and to give a fuck, because it directly associates to our omnivore diet of like eating all this stuff. And like, you know, anyway, I don't want to take up any more time that we don't have to. You got to get going in 10 minutes. Before we do say goodbye, any calls to action? Obviously, this is your life. You travel the country. You work with restaurants to help reduce carbon footprint, and you really specialize in carbon accounting, right? That's kind of your jam. That's
kind of the course. Like, how do you corporate sustainability? I'd say, and corporate sustainability has a lot of aspects. But I'd say, look, say hi. So if you want to email me, it's just Adriel at attainablesustainabilitybook.com. You could go to attainablesustainabilitybook.com. There's a bunch of free stuff on there, like buy the book, don't buy the book, whatever you want. LinkedIn, I'm really loud and talk about stuff all the time. So just Adriel Lubarksy. So like, if you want to reach out, I'm super open. We can talk strategy. We can talk ideas. Like, you just say hi. Would love to talk to anybody, and I'm very, very open.
Awesome. So we got your email. You work with you're associated with, was it
GreenPlaces?
GreenPlaces. And what do they do specifically?
So we do carbon accounting. So we'll help you measure your emissions, build a plan to reduce it. It's a software company. It'll make it easy. It's cheaper than your alternatives. You know, all the good stuff that if you're interested, I'll tell you more. But if you're not interested, there's lots of options for you, and I'll guide you towards whatever's right.
And this is episode 1026. Head over to restaurantunstoppable.com/1026. We'll have links to how to connect with Adriel over there, as well as links over to Green. Why can't I remember the name?
GreenPlaces.
Thank you very much.
Two little words. Two little words.
Seriously, catch story.
Dude, 1026. That's insane. That's impressive.
Thank you very much. And I do want to have you call somebody out. I know you're working with a lot of great brands out there. Is there a brand specifically that really impresses you, who's doing it right, who's profitable and sustainable, that it has this great values, that somebody who I need to make an example of?
Yeah.
I'm already going after Just Salads.
We talked about Zingerman's a lot. And we talked about Just Salad a lot, so I won't give them I won't say anything about them. We talked about Condado Tacos as well. We haven't talked about Pat Croce and Company.
Okay.
I love Pat Croce. They're restaurant group. They work in Florida, and they work in Hotel State College, which is where Penn State is. They got like 15 locations, and they're doing this stuff. They don't talk about it. They don't brag about it. They just they do the work. They're trying to figure it out. They put money behind it. They really care about it. And I really like them, and they're good people. But Pat Croce is a great group.
What's it called? Pat Croce's?
Yeah, Pat, P-A-T, C-R-O-C-E. So Pat Croce Group or Pat Croce and Company. And they own a bunch of different brands.
Where are they based
the
out
group. State College in Pennsylvania.
Oh, nice and close too.
Yeah, and they own some places in I think the Florida Keys, but they're great and unsung heroes.
All right, look out, guys! I'm coming after you. I'd love to get you on the show, and you already have your email out there to the people. So now is when I say thank you so much, Adriel. Am I saying it right? I'm always afraid I'm saying.
No,
your
you
name.
nailed it.
All right,
perfect.
Beautiful. There is no questioning. You are unstoppable.
Thank you, Eric.
Cheers.
This was great.
Thank you.